In 1944, Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish businessman from a wealthy banking family, arrived in Nazi-occupied Hungary. He wasn't there for trade, but for a desperate humanitarian mission. Armed with Schutzpasses, protective passports he designed himself, he aimed to save as many Jews as possible from the Holocaust's final, most brutal phase directed by Adolf Eichmann. Wallenberg established safe houses under the Swedish flag, creating a neutral sanctuary in the heart of a war zone. He didn't just stay in his office. He frequently climbed onto the roofs of trains bound for Auschwitz, handing out passports to reaching hands and pulling people off the tracks. His courage was a direct defiance of the SS, protected only by his diplomatic status. As the winter of 1944 set in, the Red Army surrounded Budapest. The city became a frozen battlefield of house-to-house fighting. Amidst the falling shells and starvation, Wallenberg continued his work, even bribing officials to prevent the massacre of the city's central ghetto. He saved an estimated 100,000 lives, becoming a living legend of resistance and compassion. In January 1945, the Soviet Union liberated Budapest. Wallenberg, ever proactive, sought to meet with the Soviet commanders to discuss the reconstruction and protection of the refugees. On January 17th, he was seen leaving for the Soviet headquarters in Debrecen, accompanied by his driver, Vilmos Langfelder. Quote, he told his staff, "I'm going to the Russians, but I'm not sure if as a guest or a prisoner." That car ride was the last time Wallenberg was seen as a free man. Instead of returning to his mission, he disappeared into the vast Soviet military machine. His family in Sweden waited for word, but the silence from Moscow was absolute. The man who had faced down the Gestapo was now swallowed by the secret world of the NKVD, the Soviet Internal Security Force. It was later confirmed that Wallenberg was taken to Moscow and imprisoned in the notorious Lubyanka prison. Why the Soviets arrested a neutral hero remains a mystery. Some believe Stalin suspected him of being a spy for the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, or the British. Others thought the Soviets wanted to use him as a high-stakes bargaining chip in post-war negotiations. In the early post-war years, the Swedish government was hesitant to pressure the Soviet Union too firmly. They feared damaging their delicate neutrality or sparking a conflict with the new superpower. This cautious approach was later criticized by Wallenberg's family, who felt the government had abandoned their hero in a desperate attempt to maintain diplomatic peace. In 1957, following years of denials, the Soviet Union finally issued an official statement. Known as the Gromyko Memorandum, it claimed that Wallenberg had died of a myocardial infarction heart attack in his cell in July 1947. No body was produced, and the medical report was viewed by the West as a crude fabrication to cover up an execution or a death from mistreatment. Despite the official death date, sightings of Wallenberg in the Gulag system persisted for decades. Former prisoners claimed to have communicated with him through the pipes of their cells or seen him in remote Siberian labor camps. These whispers suggested he was prisoner number 7, a high-value captive hidden away from the world under a false name to protect Soviet secrets. Interrogations revealed that Wallenberg had been handled by SMERSH, the Soviet counterintelligence unit. Documents suggest he was subjected to intense questioning about his American connections. The Soviets couldn't understand why a wealthy Swede would risk his life for strangers, unless he was working for a foreign intelligence service with a hidden political agenda. Wallenberg's mother and stepfather never stopped fighting for the truth. They spent their lives and fortune lobbying world leaders and investigating every lead. Tragically, both took their own lives in 1979. Heartbroken and exhausted by decades of Soviet lies and the lack of closure regarding their sons' ultimate fate in the dark heart of the Soviet Union. In 1981, thanks to the efforts of survivors he had saved, Raoul Wallenberg was made an honorary citizen of the United States. He was only the second person in history to receive this honor, after Winston Churchill. It was a powerful message to Moscow that the world had not forgotten the lost hero and that his disappearance remained a stain on international relations. After the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, researchers hoped the truth would finally emerge from the KGB archives. While some documents were found confirming his imprisonment, many key files appeared to have been destroyed or remained heavily redacted. The full picture of his final days stayed obscured by the lingering shadows of the Cold War and state secrecy. In a symbolic and practical move, The Swedish tax agency officially declared Raoul Wallenberg dead in October 2016. They set his date of death as July 31, 1952, 5 years after he was last confirmed to be alive. This allowed his estate to be settled, but for historians and his surviving family, the legal declaration was no substitute for a real, documented answer. A leading theory among modern researchers is that Wallenberg was executed by firing squad in 1947 Soviet defector. Pavel Sudoplatov claimed that Wallenberg was killed by lethal injection in a secret laboratory, whether by bullet or poison. It is widely believed that Stalin personally ordered the death of the man who knew too much about the brewing Cold War. In 2016, the diaries of Ivan Serov, the first head of the KGB, were discovered hidden in a wall of his dacha. In them, he wrote, "I have no doubt that Wallenberg was liquidated in 1947. This was one of the most direct admissions from a high-level Soviet official, yet it still lacked the how and where that would bring a final, definitive end to the mystery." Today, monuments to Wallenberg stand in Budapest, Stockholm, London, and New York. They depict him as a man of action, often with his briefcase and his protective passports. These statues serve as a reminder that one person can make a difference against the greatest evils, even if that person is eventually consumed by the very darkness they fought to illuminate. The Wallenberg Jews and their descendants now number in the hundreds of thousands. For them, Raoul is more than a historical figure. He is the reason they exist. Their lives are his greatest legacy, far outlasting the walls of the Lubyanka or the secrets of the KGB. Every year, they gather to honor the man who gave them a future when they had none. Wallenberg's story is often taught as a lesson in moral courage. He had no obligation to help, yet he chose to put himself in harm's way. His disappearance is a cautionary tale of how easily a hero can be lost in the gears of totalitarianism. But his life is a beacon of hope, showing that humanity can survive even in the most inhumane of times. The case of Raoul Wallenberg remains technically open. Historians continue to press the Russian government for full access to the 1947 interrogation records, until the final piece of paper is released or his remains are identified. The Angel of Budapest will remain a wanderer in the annals of history, hero who saved thousands but could not be saved himself.